With Nod Krai bringing Genshin back and WuWa making waves, it's time to talk about tribalism. The gacha space is forever filled with rage and divisive takes, with people picking sides and refusing to engage with one another. If my experience is anything to go by, it's very easy to get caught in the crossfire, and many people will take a simple misunderstanding and extrapolate from there until they think they know everything about your perspective. A lot of this is the fault of content creators, or if not fault, at least responsibility. But unfortunately, the incentives created by the platforms we use and basic human nature makes this whole mess almost inevitable. Fortunately, while the people who revel in all of that are loud, they are a minority. And while it's a little annoying to have to deal with, I do find it fascinating. But what is tribalism anyway? People emotionally invest in the things they care about, be it sports teams, political perspectives, or things like gacha games. Once someone aligns themselves with a specific game or character or creator, they immerse themselves in a niche where all of those around them feel the same about those things. They feel a sense of community, which makes them feel less alone, and their perspective gets reinforced. But then, when they encounter someone who thinks differently, it no longer feels like a simple disagreement. Instead, it's seen as an attack on their identity itself, and so, of course, they respond with vitriol. People start defending multi-billion-dollar corporations like they're a childhood friend. One interesting aspect is how often they have a gigantic blind spot. When they see the same behavior in others who like a different game, they can see how ridiculous it is, but instead of re-evaluating their own perspective, they double down, and whenever the two communities are placed in opposition, anger and controversy erupts. Why is this content everywhere? Why do creators embrace it? What are the consequences? And why do I have to deal with the fallout? A key part in this is the role of content creators, and for many it begins with the subtle influence of the algorithm and other similar incentives. Platforms like YouTube reward divisiveness, controversial titles and thumbnails get more clicks, toxic rhetoric gets more comments, hot takes get widely shared and drive engagement. An easy way to stand out amongst a sea of voices clamoring for attention is to make a scene. The algorithm sees the whirlwind of activity this creates as a positive and rewards it with ever more exposure. In contrast, a thoughtful, balanced analysis with a less bombastic title will often fade into obscurity, even if it's far more well-researched and well-presented than your average slop tube content. This leaves creators who see this as more than just a hobby with a tough decision to make. Take the road which they know has a higher chance of leading to success, even if it's not the kind of content they really care for, or gamble their entire career on the hope they'll find a way to build an audience without resorting to those tactics. And intentionally or not, creators often lean into it at least a little to drive engagement. When something gets a lot more views, there's a natural pressure to keep producing similar content. Exaggerated emotions and hyperbolic statements keep a certain type of audience coming back, so you'll see creators screaming at the screen in excitement when reacting to a trailer, or crashing out in rage when a game does something they're not happy with. I'd be surprised if they actually react like that when not on camera, and if they do, I hope they get some help. When everything becomes a spectacle, full of posturing and point scoring, the actual games get pushed aside and it's easy for everyone to lose perspective. And once you start yelling and hyperventilating about one thing, even just for the effect, if you don't do that the next time, then people will feel you're no longer quite as enthusiastic, and since that's what they're there for, they might just drift away. Many creators get stuck in a loop where they have to resort to hyperbole whenever talking about things they love or hate. And unfortunately, every creator who leans into this is setting up a feedback loop of reinforcing bias in their audience. Those kinds of reactions appeal the most to people who themselves are particularly passionate about that subject, whether that's love for one thing or hatred for another. So the more it happens, the more it builds and builds. And then once you have an audience who all feel a particular way about something, any deviation from that expected line might feel like a betrayal to them. The more passionate the fan base, the more intense the tribal expectations become. That's a recipe for audience capture, erasure of nuance, and even create a burnout if they were playing it up even just a little. And I think the consequences of that point bear much greater emphasis. There are many different reasons people create content: to entertain, to connect with others, to help people play smarter, to share passion for the things they enjoy, to think critically and spark interesting conversations, or, of course, just to chase success. Tribalism inflames some of these motivations while suppressing others. Many find it entertaining, and it can create a sense of belonging and bring the creator that success. But building an audience around it reinforces those perverse incentives even further and leaves you with less scope to engage in more nuanced discussions. And as many creators discover, even if you go ahead and make that content anyway, some people in your comments will tell you in no uncertain terms that they don't appreciate you stepping out of the space you created for yourself. Instead, many find themselves in a downward spiral with no way to get out. And unfortunately, whenever all of this is normalized, it spreads out into the rest of the space as well, and other creators who did not make those same choices have to deal with the consequences too. When people are used to creators who act this way, it's natural for them to assume that everyone else does as well. Even if you present your thoughts in a more calm and measured way, they will suspect you're being disingenuous and invent ulterior motives behind your words. I'm here because there are things I feel compelled to talk about. If that brings in an audience, then that's amazing, and I'll always appreciate anyone who takes the time to hear my thoughts, but I still talk about the same things even if it didn't. But unfortunately, thanks to the state of things in general, there's no way to convince some people of that fact. A while back, I made a video about my experience returning to Wuthering Waves. Yes, this one again. I enjoyed the game at first, but ended up a little underwhelmed by the time we reached the end of version 1, largely because the exploration didn't feel like exploring to me. I stopped playing for a while, and I didn't make a video like why I stopped playing WuWa, because at the end of the day, it was a very good game with a clear target audience, even if it wasn't for me. Then, when version 2 dropped, I tried it again and found that the changes to the exploration made it feel fantastic for my preferences. A perfect opportunity to make the kind of video I enjoy. One which explores the pros and cons of different approaches to game design and praises the devs for making such huge improvements for people like me without making it any less fun for the people who had enjoyed the game before. That's an incredibly hard balance to strike, and it deserves far more recognition. I went out of my way to make it clear that even in version 1, for many people who wanted something different from the game, the choices WuWa made were objectively great. Overall, Kura did a good job, and they just took it to another level in Rinasita. I made 2 mistakes in that video. The first was assuming people would understand. The script I wrote was over twice as long at first, with much more detailed explanation of where my perspective came from. But since it all seemed obvious to me, I cut it down to the minimum. The second was living in my own little bubble where people enjoy hearing perspectives which are different from their own. Instead, a certain group of people heard even the mildest critique and interpreted it as a hate-filled rant from someone with a dark and biased agenda. To this day, many of them just assume that's where I'm coming from. I should have done a better job of getting my point across, and I'm thankful to the many people who had frank discussions on that video which gave me the chance to explain myself more clearly. It's just a shame that some people are so tribalistic that they can't even bring themselves to hear a different point of view. The main change this has led to in my videos is that I'm more comfortable letting them be whatever length gives me the room to get my point across, even if it's far longer than the 10 to 15 minutes I had aimed for previously. I still try to condense them down to be respectful of people's time, but on balance, it's better to be a little more relaxed. It's still sad that people are so insecure in their own thoughts that when someone disagrees with them, they feel the need to attack, but at least I made some fun merch out of my favorite of the comments. As that example emphasizes, people get used to all of this pretty quickly, begin to think in terms of us versus them, and start to aggressively apply that to creators too. When people see the world through this lens of tribalism, they're forever trying to fit people into those neat and tidy categories. Any critique of something they like, especially if they didn't experience the downsides for themselves, will instantly see you written off as a hater, a grifter, or even an outright racist if you happen to feel disappointed with something even vaguely associated with non-Western cultures. Any praise for something they dislike, and you're at best misguided, but more likely a disingenuous shill who is only in it for the views. And of course, if you express concern over things like power creep, the direction of the endgame, the predatory practices, and so on, then you just suck at the game and you're salty that you can't get all the rewards. From just a single video, people extrapolate an entire worldview, an idea of who you are as a person, and nothing will convince them that they might have been mistaken. And the moment they have that in mind, either from some past encounter or just because their echo chamber said so, they'll remain forever convinced that they are right. Instead of engaging with a discussion like most people would and saying things like, I disagree with your take because, they come in with heated arguments against the thing they think you said, even if they haven't watched the video at all and often do not even have the slightest clue what you actually talked about. One of the most important skills in life is the ability to listen and to learn. Nobody knows everything. Nobody is right 100% of the time, and there is no such thing as objective fact when you're talking about opinions on a video game. Anyone who claims to that is being disingenuous or is locked into their own personal echo chamber. For anyone who does this, just know you're missing out. Those of us who can handle differences of opinion have much richer and more nuanced experience with the games we play because we get to hear how other people felt about it too. And it does make you wonder what the end game of these people is. Do they want the new people to the game to feel afraid of sharing their perspective since they know they might just get attacked for disagreeing? Do they want videos filled with more caveats than content? Do they want any strong opinions to just be left unsaid? Do they want creators to lie to them and hide their true perspective out of fear of getting hate? Or do they really want a world where the moment someone isn't completely ecstatic with a game, they have to stop talking about it at all? Because I have news for them, no game is perfect. If that's the bar we have to pass, then nobody would ever talk about anything. Personally, I look at content creators who analyze films, TV, books, and so on, and wish more of the gaming sphere would follow that blueprint. Over there, people analyze what makes films tick, what makes the best successful, what flaws made others fail to reach their full potential. It's fascinating, and every time I'm left with a deeper appreciation for the art, even if I disagreed with a creator's perspective. Those are the videos I try to create, and one of my favorite things is seeing comments which start with "thanks for sharing your perspective," even though I completely disagree. Thankfully, it seems like only a minority, even in the gaming sphere, are die-hard tribespeople. So many people are open, engaged, and have such interesting things to say which bring new understanding to the conversation. The tribespeople often feel louder, but in my comments at least, the ones who want to explore ideas together are much more prevalent. And one aspect of this tribalism which I'm actually in two minds about is the way people reject creators who wish to return to games they used to love. The reason I'm in two minds about this is that there are, undeniably, creators who deliberately stoke the flames in the hopes of getting views, and these creators can genuinely make a community fall apart. When they move on to a different game, it can feel like a relief, because when the toxicity is gone, those who stick around have far more space to have nuanced discussions. But at the same time, many others get lumped in with this as well. Even creators who have always been constructive get this treatment, even if they barely shared why they moved on to something else in the first place. If they were to return, it would be a net positive to the space, yet people treat them just the same. And there are those in the middle too, people who criticize out of genuine love for the game, and maybe lean into the hyperbole because that's what drives the algorithm. It's kinda sad, but it feels like that might be the price you agree to pay when you make those kinds of choices. I'm all for giving people second chances, but I understand those who feel that bridges have been burned. I guess it just depends how far they took it and how honest they were along the way. The people in my comments who fall the most into tribalism regularly devolve into pure comedy, to the point where I could half believe that they were legitimately joking. For example, ever since that video about Renacita, which I mentioned earlier, there have been a handful of people who like to comment on every WuWa video I make and to assume I'm making some unfounded criticism, even when it's the polar opposite of what my video actually says. The comments which made me want to finally make this video were from a week or two ago when I made a video speculating about Phrolova. She's a prominent antagonist who had been in the story from the beginning, who was about to become playable. For a long time, I had wanted to talk about the disappointing pattern across gachas in general, where antagonists have their misdeeds wiped away, and this was the perfect opportunity. The video explores where people's concerns came from, why antagonists and villains are so important to stories, why I disagree with the idea that evil doesn't sell, and then covers our past encounters with Phrolova and the three paths they could have taken with her. Keep her as a pure villain, add context but keep her towards the darker end of moral grey, or turn her into an uwu doppelganger. Obviously, I wanted the first or second, and I had faith that Kuro would deliver. As I said in the video, I felt the middle option was most likely. And as I'll cover in more detail in my next video, they did a fantastic job with her story, and she's a shining example of what I want from an antagonist in any game. My original video was correct on every point. And yet, the moment they played Phrolova's story, these commenters piled into my video and said my take had aged like milk. Apparently, I wonder how they'll handle this and hope they'll go with option B is a bad take, especially when they do indeed go with option B. It's wild to me that people will so confidently leave a public comment on something they so clearly know nothing about. While I enjoy the entertainment that comes from having these bizarre takes in my comments, I can't help but feel sad for these people, who probably miss out on so many interesting discussions because of their myopia. And in the interests of balance, it's important to note that while my two examples so far have focused on Wuthering Waves, it's just as prevalent in other communities as well. My takes on Natlan, for example. Again, I always take pains to emphasize that my perspective is just that, one person's view on the experience and far from objective truth. Many people had a different experience, and I've had many enlightening discussions with them which helped me appreciate the story in ways which the original experience sadly didn't capture for me. That's the whole point of my videos. videos, to acknowledge that everyone feels differently about each part of the game, to spark discussion, and through exploring what made me feel the way I did, to get to learn why other people had a different take. But, of course, many people hate it when you give even the mildest of critiques, and in their mind it becomes, I hate this is stupid, anyone who likes it is stupid, and it should not exist. Guess that might just be how they approach things that they don't like. I just posted a video where I tried to explore why I personally had such a different reaction to the upcoming Nod Krai character designs compared to the ones from Natlan. I leaned on my background in design and focused on the part that matters at this point given how little we know about Nod Krai. The visuals, the aesthetics, the vibes. All highly subjective, which I made clear from start to finish, and many people said they had the same experience. Other commenters pointed to the lore as the justification for the way Hoyo handled Natlan, but frankly, lore explains why things might be the way they are, but that doesn't change the experience of how people felt towards the designs at first. One comes before the other, and the more disjointed the first impressions are, the more the lore and story would have to fix in order for things to feel coherent by the end. For many of us, it simply did not bridge that gap, and even that's beside the point. The video was not an attempt to gather evidence and present an argument. It was not about right or wrong at all. It was an observation that lots of people feel a similar way about these things, and an exploration of where those feelings come from. But while those commenters got their hackles raised and ended up missing the point I was trying to make, their perspective on the game itself is perfectly valid, and at least they engaged in the discussion. Meanwhile, the ones who really missed the boat were those who interpret criticism of anything related to Natlan as outright racism. Out of over 1,000 comments, I saw one person who was an actual bigot, and they're not welcome here. Accusing people of racism because they felt a video game's aesthetics were incohesive is utterly unhinged. People on both sides of that whole Natlan debate fall prey to this same tribalism. I've seen some people who agreed with my perspective but spent their time bashing those who like Natlan's designs. That's just as disappointing as the behavior of those who bash people for disliking them. If you find yourself on the verge of giving in to that temptation, it's worth taking a step back and maybe think about it for an hour or two before you go ahead and reply. Tribalism kills nuanced discussion, especially when it comes to critiques of games which people care about so much. There's always a reason behind your like or dislike of something, and figuring them out can be fascinating. Far more interesting than just saying this is peak or this is ass and leaving it at that. For those who agree, gaining greater insight can be validating, and it can actually reduce resentment and bring back appreciation for the other parts of the game they liked, or even provide enough emotional distance that they can start seeing the positives of the parts which didn't work for them. For those who don't agree, it can help them understand the other perspective on that point and maybe spark discussion which lets them share their love for it in a way which might help others see the positives at last. While the echo chambers are loud, they really are a tiny minority of the community at large. In case anyone skipped to the end, here's your too long didn't watch, woman. Until next time.